up, everybody? Maya May here. I'm here with Tim Whitaker from the New Evangelicals. He and I have had many conversations in the past, and I think it's important that y'all join in on this conversation with us because if you're like me and you're seeing everybody who has Christian in their bio justify
Mm.
mass deportations, the separation of families, and they're using Bible verses to do it, I'm like, oh, we need to bring Tim Whitaker on the live. So, Tim, thank you for being here. It's Monday. How was your No Kings weekend?
It was busy. I was actually in Chicago. Do you know who Reverend Otis Moss III is?
I don't.
He's over in Chicago. He's essentially Obama's pastor. I was
Okay.
hanging out with him and some people up there for the weekend. I was flying home on Saturday. But a lot of people in our community from the New Evangelicals were protesting. We actually just posted a montage on our Instagram account of people
I did
holding
see
up
that.
signs that were super Christian, who are fighting for a more just and fair society and who are condemning ICE. So that was encouraging, because a lot of us. I mean, I grew up very evangelical and conservative and Christian, and I left that behind to be more faithful to Jesus. And sometimes it can feel like you're alone. Like, is it just me who's
Mhm.
kind of worried as a Christian about these mass deportations? Really, they're really kidnappings and abductions, really. And so to see so many signs with like, Jesus would never tolerate this, and quoting scripture was just really encouraging.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, because I'm like, Jesus would not deport Jesus or Jesus, and Jesus was a refugee. And so for me, I'm out, I went to a few protests here in LA, and this is like, it's deeply personal because we see people getting ripped away from the communities, like right in front of us. And I've had a lot of, we've talked about this before. One of my neighbors, very deep in the faith community, and he finally came out and posted about it, made a video saying, how could you say that you're following the teachings of Jesus and then be okay with this? And the hate that was in the comments. Can you talk about what exactly is going on that Christianity is supposed to be about protecting the vulnerable and the weak? When did that change?
Okay. All right. Let's back up for a second. That's a great question. Let's talk about our terms, okay? As and you and I have discussed this on your show before. Christianity is like any religion is a big house. There are a
Mhm,
lot of rooms. In America, we have to deal with what I call is white. Well, I don't call this. Matthew Taylor calls it this: white Christian supremacy. Okay,
mhm,
we're not talking about every single Christian. In fact, most Christians historically actually do welcome the immigrant and are about social justice initiatives. I mean, even early evangelicals were that way. The problem is that we are facing a very militant strain of Christianity in America today that has convinced a lot of people that somehow it is the Christian position to deport the immigrant instead of welcoming the immigrant. And so, what we're doing as an organization is we're fighting that because we believe that, Jesus, who not only was an immigrant himself, but also who commanded us to treat the least of these with love, care, and respect by saying, what you do to the least of these, you do unto me, that we have an obligation, right, to fight for the well being of our immigrant neighbor. What's happening in America is essentially Christian nationalism. I'm assuming most people who are watching this have heard of that before, but we are
yes.
dealing with Christian nationalism, and this is what it is. And Christian nationalism is the foundation of it. And this is not comfortable for a lot of people, but it's true. It's white supremacy. If you look up the white Protestant history in America, from race-based chattel slavery through Jim Crow, through lynching, segregation, etc., it's white Protestants and then white evangelicals that were some of the biggest supporters of those initiatives. And that strain still lives on today in the form of white evangelicalism. And so, that's what's going on. Like we're not facing just Christianity that is telling people don't welcome the immigrant. It is white Christian nationalists that say, no, this is our country. We're a country chosen by God to do amazing things, and we have to keep America a certain. We have to keep it a certain way, and that way just happens to be where we're on top and everyone else is on bottom, and that's just the reality. And this is not just me talking. There's so much scholarship on this. Bradley Onishi, Matthew Taylor, Kristen Dumais, Beth Allison Barr have all documented things like this, explaining how we got here. But look, this is my tradition. Okay. I was homeschooled for 9 years. I grew up a conservative evangelical Christian. I sang the song, I'm in the Lord's army as a child. So when I tell people that this particular strain of Christianity is militant. It doesn't believe in pluralism. It doesn't believe in democracy ultimately. It doesn't believe multiculturalism. It believes in maintaining cultural power and control over everything else. I'm not exaggerating or making it up. I mean, that's exactly what I experienced growing up in those spaces.
Well, and so what you're describing is extremism. Like they're clearly
Yes.
extremists who
Yes.
have hijacked an entire religion, it seems, and tried to make it as if that this is what the Bible stands for. And so, at least that's the from as a. And I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Christian. I grew up in all religions. I went to Catholic school. I went to
Mhm.
my grandmother's Baptist church. My parents used to take me to an ashram. So I've been exposed to many religions. And so when I see this, um, in particular in comments when people cite Bible verses, like
Yes.
actual Bible verses
Yes.
about following the law. Can you talk about these ones? Because there's very specific ones where they're like, well, we're supposed to obey the law and follow the law, and these people broke the law, and therefore that's why it's okay to separate families and destroy communities.
Look, I try and be very fair in how I talk about this because the reality is this: the Bible is a complicated collection of ancient texts. That's what it is. Okay, it was compiled over 1,000 plus years, many different authors who wrote it, compiled it, edited it. And we as Christians, I mean, big picture, have been debating what's in it and what to do with it since the beginning. I mean, even in the Christian tradition, the Eastern Orthodox, the Catholics, and the Protestants don't even agree on what books go in their Bibles. Right. So let's just start from that vantage point. When we zoom into white Christian nationalism, they have their own set of what we call our proof texts to pull from to justify their claims. Now, to be clear, to a degree, all Christians do this. I mean, most people don't follow the Bible's prohibition to not eat shellfish because we have a certain hermeneutic or interpretive lens that would tell us this is not applicable to us today. So, as a Christian who's much more now leftist or progressive, certainly I have that framework as well. But I'm more honest about it, right? White Christian nationalists, what they say is that we have a biblical worldview. They'll say, we're just following what God's word clearly says. Well, no, you're not. You're actually picking and choosing certain verses, I would argue, usually out of their context to justify very hateful beliefs that, again, who benefits from those beliefs? Who benefits from the rhetoric that they push? They do. It's not our immigrant neighbors. It's not our queer neighbors. It's not our black neighbors. They don't benefit from these ideologies or these policies. White Christians primarily benefit from the policies that they want to implement. And so when they talk about law or God's law, this comes, and I'm sorry I'm a little long-winded here, but there's such a history that people need to know. This comes from an ideology called Christian dominionism. And the person who was kind of the initial architect of this idea that took off, it's a weird name. His name is R.J. Rushdoony. He comes out of the 60s and 70s. And essentially what he says is that for me as a Christian, I want to replace American civil law with what he calls is biblical law, which is mostly drawing from the Old Testament. He believed that, as he would say, homosexuals should be stoned to death. He believed that adulterers should be stoned to death in his society. And he also believed, and tell me if this sounds familiar, audience. He also believed that public school systems were indoctrinating children and should be abolished. Have we seen a war on public education over the
Yeah,
past few
like,
years?
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
anyone, right? So, like, all of what we're seeing, all these culture war issues, they stem out of Rush Junie and then later on Jerry Falwell. And that's what we're dealing with. That is the reality. This is not, Trump is not like a fluke in the system for white evangelicals. He is the fruit of decades of culture war ideology and really intense fundamentalism that sees the Bible in a specific way. Last thing I'll say is that, in my opinion, the Bible can be used as a tool for liberation or a weapon of oppression. And if you look throughout American history, we can see that between the white church and the black church, right? Martin Luther King Jr., motivated by his faith in Jesus and the scriptures, argues that all people are created equal and should be treated as such. At the same time, white segregationists are also using the Bible to justify why God ordered the world a certain way and therefore the races should stay separate. So the Bible is not monolithic, it's not always clear, but it can be used for a tool of liberation or a weapon of oppression. And our goal as new evangelicals is to use it always as a tool for liberation for all of our neighbors.
So, looking at it as like a choose your own adventure sort of a situation. people, you're saying there's many rooms. So people can choose, it seems, to go into a room where it is about liberation and not oppression. And so is it just a luck of the draw if you end up in a church community where the leader is a Christian nationalist, white supremacist? Or is there a way for people to break out? And not just on their own, like organically, where I know your story is you met somebody while you were working, I think, at Starbucks, uh, and that led you to your own kind of inquiry. But is there a way to reach people who have maybe gone into the wrong room and don't even realize that there are other rooms that are much more about liberation?
Well, look, that is my story. I mean, I call myself someone who was brought up in the basement of Christianity. The dark, damp basement where I thought there was nothing above ground, right? But you know what got me out of it? Yes, it was people, but also it was my commitment to Jesus. Do you know how hard it is to read the Sermon on the Mount and then look at how white evangelicals vote and the policies they advocate for and to square that? That's why I say that Christian nationalism is Christian. There are, unfortunately, in the Christian tradition, militant streams of Christianity, but it is antichrist. You cannot claim to follow Jesus and advocate for what Christian nationalism advocates for.
Those
Jesus
feel like
clearly
strong
teaches.
words. Saying
What's up?
antichrist made me nervous. Those feel like strong words.
Well,
Are
it's
those
true.
okay?
I mean, Jesus tells his followers, right? Love your enemies.
Mhm.
Christian nationalists want to build new crosses to crucify their enemies on. It is the opposite of what Christ advocates for, right? Jesus says to take care of the sick, take care of those in prison. And Christian nationalism says, hey, you know what we should do? Let's strip Medicaid and Medicare from tons of underprivileged people, especially children, right?
Mhm.
Jesus tells us to take care of the children around us. And Christian nationalists want to strip our school systems of public funding to feed some of those kids, right? So, like, it just doesn't, the math doesn't math for me the more I look at it.
Right, and for me neither, especially when, in this particular instance over the weekend, it was somebody who lives on the street of the man who was selling flowers who was taken. And even his own friends and his own church community, when he spoke up, were silent. And these were people who were very close to him. And he found himself being incredibly disillusioned that he himself saw the light, but then they didn't. So, how do we offer companionship? How do we help these people? Because it seems like in order to leave one community, there has to be another community for them to be able to be welcomed into. Otherwise, they're not going to leave.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true, and this is a multi-level problem, right? On a national level, we have to do what we all did on Saturday, especially Christians, right? We need Christians holding up the signs, protesting loud, and saying, "No, I'm not going to go along with this Christian fascism. Like, this is
Mhm.
not in our name, right?" So we need that on the political level. I don't believe in working with Christian nationalists, and here's why on the political level: because Christian nationalists do not want to work with other people. I mean, Charlie Kirk is a good example of this, right? Charlie Kirk, the founder of Turning Point USA, he's very clear that they are here to take over. And again, this is all data. PRRI does the research on this. Someone like Charlie Kirk, or who holds his views, they're less likely to want to work together with people on the political left, right? They believe that those people are evil, are demonic, need to be destroyed. So on a political level, we have to resist Christian nationalism and also elect leaders who have a freaking spine to stand up for this stuff. That's number one. On an individual level, though, right? On the interpersonal relationship level that people don't see online, we have to be willing to have the conversations and ask our friends hard questions. So and so, if you're a follower of Jesus and we see that Jesus clearly teaches, right, to love the stranger, which the word really there is immigrant, can you help me explain how what the administration did to Kilmar Abrego Garcia is Christ-like, right? They admitted, and by the way, this supersedes the talking points. What's the talking point for those people? Well, don't break the law and you'll be okay. Okay, first off, that's totally ignorant. Our system is so broken. But number two, in Kilmar's case, the government admitted that they made a mistake.
Mhm.
They admitted it was a clerical error, and they still didn't bring him back for months. And when they did, they gave him bogus charges, right? So again, you have to ask your friends in good faith. Can you help me understand? Put them on defense. Help me understand how this is consistent with the teachings of Christ.
Okay.
right? And that's honestly, again, my I mean, I'm the reason why I still do this work of advocacy and believing that people can change their mind is because I changed my mind. I
Right.
was someone who marched in pro-life movements with a huge shirt in all caps that said abortion is homicide. That was me at age 15. I was marching in those rallies. I believed that we had to take America back and we had to stand up for Christian values. But I was persuaded because I had radical allegiance to the way of Jesus. And as I studied the way of Jesus, I thought something isn't right with my own faith tradition and who they're advocating for. So it's both and. We fight like hell on the national and political level, right? We fight for school boards. We fight back at the local level. On the interrelational level, though, we have to have the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the isolation of it all also really speaks to me because you were able to grow and inquire about these things because you met someone, because you met somebody who is different, who your teachings had told you was demonic. And then you met this person and you're like, LGBTQ people actually aren't demonic. Maybe
Right.
these teachings were incorrect. And
Right.
so it's almost like an abusive relationship in a way that some people have with their church, it feels, where it's like, we're going to isolate you and keep you from meeting other people. You need to stay only because I was looking at, I think it was not, who's the one? Is it Catherine Frick, I think her name is.
I don't
She's
know.
she has a book and it's about not making sure you don't date or marry somebody outside of your faith because that leaves an opening for the devil to come in.
That's almost every evangelical book on dating. So it could be 1,000 different people who wrote that.
Right, because the danger is, uh-oh, if you meet somebody outside of this specific sect, then you might learn that the teachings might be skewed or wrong or etcetera, and so I try to look at it as an abusive relationship, like, would you allow somebody that you love to stay in an abusive relationship, or would you try to break them out? And so I always believe, that it's possible for people to change and to grow. That's what being human is about
Right.
evolving. Let's bring it to stuff that's happening right now, which we have the situation in Minnesota, the political assassination that happened in Minnesota over the weekend, and immediately right wing media tried to come out and say, "Oh, the shooter was a Democrat who was angry at Democrats."
Like he was hired by Walls at one point. Yeah, I saw all that. Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
insanity, huge blind spot, obviously, and so that's something that we need to talk about, and so right before we went live, you were mentioning that he is of he's not an evangelical, he's the shooter.
Well, yeah. So the evangelical tent is very big. Okay, there are
Mm.
different. Again, there's different rooms even in that space. From what we can tell, I want to preface this is the alleged shooter. Okay, because we
Yes,
haven't
alleged
had
shooter.
an official conviction, and also like, look, whenever things are breaking, data is going to change. So I want to preface by saying this is how I understand the data at this time, and that could change. Okay, that could change, but I'm pretty tapped into some of the scholars who've been tracking this. I've had some insider conversations. I've seen some stuff online. But yeah, it appears that this person, I'm not going to name him, who really, I mean, let's face it, if this person had a different color skin and was from somewhere else in the world, they call him a terrorist. Okay, let's just acknowledge that right away, right? So this political terrorist who did this allegedly, he comes from what looks like the more charismatic world, tied loosely to what's called the New Apostolic Reformation. So
Mhm.
again, there's a lot here, and if I can, I
I was gonna
covered this
say,
stuff.
people might not know.
Yeah, yeah. We cover this stuff on our podcast, so you can go into the deeper dive on our YouTube or podcast. But essentially, these are people who believe in speaking in tongues and who believe in what they call are the gifts of the Holy Spirit. You can lay hands on someone and heal them. That's pretty typical charismatic theology. Independent charismatics really have no oversight, and they're pretty focused on like spiritual warfare. So these are people who would say like, "Hey, America has a demonic stronghold over it, and we as Christians have to pray in the Spirit." Even sometimes they'd be violent prayers, right, to release that stronghold. A lot of times, people in this space will say abortion is human sacrifice to Satan or to some kind of demonic idol. So this is, I mean, people like Sean Foyt have said this stuff for folks to know who he is. This is not fringe in that movement. It looks like this person comes from that world. Okay. Now we don't know to what extent. We have seen some videos of him preaching, and also I want to cite here Jeff Charlotte's Substack. He did a really good job on this. It looks like this person at one point was taught at an organization called Christ for the Nations, which is very much tied into the independent charismatic movement. On the wall of the like the admissions office, I guess, there's a sign that says this. I'm reading from Joseph's Substack. Here's a picture of it. Quote: "Everyone ought to pray at least one violent prayer each day."
I'm sorry, what's a violent prayer? I don't even know what
Um,
that is. Can you
yeah,
tell us what a violent prayer is?
well, this goes back into this idea. I mean, there's a verse in the Bible called that where Jesus is talking. He says, "The violent take it by force." Again, there's a lot of disparage. There's a lot of dispute between the interpretation of that. Charismatics, in particular, New Apostolic Reformation folks, take that quite literally at times. I mean,
Mhm.
look, I know I'm saying a lot here, so people just have to trust me. But it was the independent charismatic world that was largely behind the spiritual side of January 6th. Okay, they were the ones who were praying, who were warring, who were in the spirit realm, warring for the election to be overturned. So this stuff, it is there in the ideology of waging violent prayers against the enemy. And so, I'm watching media reports say we don't know the motive of this person. And while it's true that right now I don't have hard data, being in this space and studying this stuff, there's a very high chance that if this person is convicted, that he was motivated by his religious extremism. Of hey, abortion is demon sacrifice. Hey, the country is taken over by demonic strongholds of liberalism and queer people. People in this space really believe that. And so, what concerns me and what has been concerning many scholars, in particular, again, Matthew Taylor, is that we're going to see more of this because can we just be honest for a second? If you really believe that every day thousands of Americans are sacrificing children to Moloch or to Satan, that's going to lead to some pretty radical views that could lead you to do radical actions. And a lot of people believe that in this space, and it's very scary.
Yeah, so I like to talk about stochastic terrorism quite a bit because we don't as much anymore. There used to be many surveys on political violence and what people felt about political violence. But when you have, like, I don't know if you saw Donald Trump's tweet truth over the weekend or it was this morning, and it was very lengthy, very unhinged, in which he, said real Americans this and,
Yeah,
radical cities and
yeah,
liberal and all these things. And so it seems like it was everything that you say about spiritual, warfare minus the spiritual part, and so
right.
this escalation, is that what they're seeking when he is going out? Is it what job is he doing? What in this is he a soldier in the war when these people go out and carry out these violent acts? It's stochastic terrorism for everybody who doesn't know. I'm assuming everybody who watches this show does know, but it's basically when somebody in a position of power or of authority speaks in a way that would induce their followers to commit violence on their behalf, but then they can kind of have plausible deniability and be like, oh, I was just speaking. That was just rhetoric, my violent rhetoric. Oh, shocking. I didn't realize that was actually going to get people killed. And so that's something that we're seeing a lot of from Republicans and from our president. I put him in
Right.
quotes
Yeah.
at this point. And so are people like this alleged shooter, is their goal to accelerate things? Are they similar to accelerationists, or is this just like I'm a one attack and done? Like what is the purpose?
I don't know. We don't know the full. Was this person working alone? Was he working with other people? I've heard some things from I would say are credible sources that like this person gave no real indication to family and friends about what he was doing, almost like a double life. And so I don't know. I will tell you that um statistically, I always like going back to data. Christian nationalists are okay with violence more so than their political counterparts who would be like a Christian nationalist rejecter, if it's on their side. And again, we look at this again. I mean, even look at the right wing. response to what just happened on Saturday with this political terrorism, right?
Mhm.
Not much has been said. Not
Yep.
much, very little. In fact, first they tried to paint it as a Democrat. There's a I'm going to use air quotes here, a journalist in the right wing spaces named Megan Basham who rushed to judgment, tried to put it on Tim Walz for hiring this person, and then has not yet redacted or edited that claim based on the very clear evidence we have that this person, who by the way, in his manifesto had abortion clinics as a target, right?
Mhm.
She has not redacted that claim yet, and so right wing media, they're going to really poo poo this. They're going to hush this. They're going to kind of let it. Okay, we're not really going to talk about this because ultimately, they're. I mean, like they might say publicly, "Oh, this is bad," but it's
Mhm.
their team. It's their team. Now, think about what happened. For example, when there was a mass shooting at the school in Tennessee, and the shooter was at that point was
Mhm.
transgender. There was no one on the left that I saw who was like, well, we can't talk about this. So we were all outraged that a mass shooting happened, that kids' lives were lost, right? So there's a very big distinction here between the right and the left generally,
Mhm.
and when it comes to issues like this, you know. So same thing with January 6th. Trump blanket pardoned every January 6th insurrectionist.
Mhm.
They don't mind violence when it's their team. They
Yep.
just don't. And that's what scares us. That's what scares me.
So, and yeah, and it's terrifying, and yet people still went out in Minnesota and protested, which I absolutely loved. I think in general, right now, people are so fed up with this idea that we're supposed to live in fear, and everyone like that's not what we're supposed to do in America. And so people are standing up anyway, which gives me hope. What gives you hope right now, if anything at all?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I will be honest, like for sure. Look, I mean, I do content for a living. I track this stuff for a living. I've been to Christian nationalist rallies. I've gone to Turning Point USA. I do all that stuff. But what is really encouraging is that there are a lot of people, and for me, it's seeing a lot of Christians saying, "Hell no!" Like, absolutely not. Like, we're not taking this sitting down. I do think, and again, I think data supports this. There are more Christian nationalist rejectors and skeptics. Those are there are four categories, right? Christian nationalist adherents, that's like your Charlie Kirks of the world. You have sympathizers, people who might kind of agree with it. Then you have skeptics and rejectors. Skeptics and rejectors way outnumber adherents and sympathizers. What is scary is how much power those radical extremists have gotten in our government, thanks to Trump and Tom Holman and Stephen Miller, Russell Vogt. I mean, there's a whole list of names there. But I think that seeing the protests even the past few months, there were protests a couple months ago, seeing them happen again is really encouraging. I really think that because of the utter depravity of this administration's actions in the name of God by some Christian pundits, I think the average American is like, look, I grew up Christian. This is not what I
Mhm.
think Jesus would ever teach. And so I'm hoping that what will happen long term is that we see a huge pushback of committed Christians who have given their allegiance to Jesus, who say, we were absolutely going to stand in the gap, right? I don't think personally it should be on my atheist neighbor, my Muslim neighbor, my Buddhist neighbor to dismantle Christian nationalism. It's
Mhm.
not your problem in the sense of you created it. I think in particular, it should be white former evangelicals who should bear that cross and kind of make it their calling card to be like, no, we will stand in the gap for this, and we will take the arrows that right wing media, launches at us because we know how this system works, and now we can help you dismantle it and fight for a better path forward. So that definitely is encouraging. There are a lot of organizations and Christian groups, including ours, the New Evangelicals, that are completely committed to dismantling Christian nationalism and helping people find a better path forward in faith, politics, and culture.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that we were able to have this conversation. We are almost out of time. And so, and I
Oh,
don't
too
want to, I don't,
bad.
yeah, but what I want to hop into next time. So, everybody who's tuned in right now, what I want to hop into next time with you, because I do want to end on a positive note. And Pete Hegseth is not a positive note.
No, no,
So
it's
exactly.
not.
So that's why everybody, this is just gonna have to be a series, so mark your calendar for a future date that I don't know what it is, but know that we're gonna have Tim back on to talk specifically about the Hegseth problem because,
Oh,
uh,
yes. Yes.
this man. So, but keeping it hopeful and positive at the end, because that's what I need to get through my Monday.
I'm
Uh,
with you, Maya. I'm with you.
so thanks everyone for joining us. Where can everybody find you, Tim? Because I think here on Substack, but you're elsewhere as well, right?
Yeah, so my personal social medias, including on Substack, is at Tim Whitaker Speaks. That's me. If you want to see the work that my organization does, it's at the New Evangelicals. We do podcasts, we do YouTube lives, we do Instagram content. We're all over the place. So if you just type in the New Evangelicals, you will find that work. We have a free community app that you can download on iOS or Android called TNE Connect. You can join our community. All of our content is paywall free because we are a nonprofit. So because of our donors, everything that we offer to you guys is completely free. So please join us, DM us. Happy to do it.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much. We're grateful for your knowledge and enjoy your week. May this week be chill. That's
I hope.
all right. Talk to you later.
Yeah.
See
Thanks.
you. Bye.